Good evening again, ladies and gentlemen. For those who were just watching the Demonology Boot Camp video, I'm going to do a quick wrap up of that. Brian is no longer with me because he's not quite ready for the insanity I'm about to set up. We're going to discuss that, and he'll be joining me for it next week. For those who are wondering, yes, we are planning on moving show night to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Fridays or Thursdays, not Fridays. Today's Thursday. But with Halloween coming up and my great fondness of vampires, I'm going to start reading you guys chapters from the 19th century book Varney the Vampire. And that is going to be the main part of what this is. I'm planning on just reading the first chapter. Depending on how that goes, future readings may be more chapters or not. This is a very long book. We're talking about over 200 chapters. So we're going to be with it a while. But let me just wrap up real quick. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed the Demonology Boot Camp. I think we covered things pretty well. There's a lot more. That's a good thing to bring up as well. My next, a new video I wanted to be doing soon. Maybe the next one, maybe a little longer, is going to be a question video, and I want to open things up, and I'd like you guys to put in the comments or send it to my email. You can find my email on most of the videos. Questions you have for me about the paranormal, demonology, religion, anything like that. And we'll talk about it on the show. Um, I don't I don't know exactly when that's going to happen. It depends on how many good questions I get to work with. But okay, let's talk a little bit about Varney the Vampire. Varney the Vampire is a gothic horror novel that appeared in weekly pamphlets from 1845 to 1847. The pamphlets are commonly known as penny dreadfuls. The story was then published in complete form in 1847. And altogether, the full length ran in the original edition 876 double-columned pages and 232 chapters. Altogether, it totals nearly 667,000 words. And it's the story of the vampire Sir Francis Varney, and it introduces a lot of the first of the tropes we know of vampires. Should be a lot of fun. Like I said, it's not one of the better known vampire stories, but it's a fairly iconic one and a fairly influential one. It certainly was a big influence on Bram Stoker when he wrote Dracula. It showed up in a couple of movies and TV shows. There's a vampire named Varney in Marvel Comics, who was the very first vampire created by Atlantis. The TV show Penny Dreadful also features the novel Varney the Vampire. Uh, Showed up in a show called, or a book or something called Strange Practice. Its sequels, The Man Who Invented Christmas, has Charles Dickens reading it as he was developing the supernatural parts of A Christmas Carol, and of course, a vampire named Varney shows up in the excellent Netflix series Castlevania. Um, the story was originally published by Edward Lloyd, whose policy was not to allow authors to put their names on their published work. Due to this, there's some disagreement about who authored the story. Um, it's usually thought to have been co-written by James Malcolm Rymer and Thomas Prescott Prest. It's also been suggested that Rymer was the most likely author due to the differences in how he wrote the dialogue compared to Prest. But yeah, it's usually thought to have been Rymer. Nobody's entirely certain because they didn't get credit. But let's get started. So, the copy I'm reading from is Varney the Vampire or The Feast of Blood, James Michael Rymer, with introduction, which I'm not, and notes by Kurt Her. Since the novel Varney the Vampire is public domain, but the notes and other aspects are not, I will not be reading those. I will strictly be sticking to the original text. and making probably some comments of my own. So, chapter 1 starts with a quote: "How graves give up their dead, and air, how the night air hideous rose with shrieks." 1. Midnight, the hailstorm, the dreadful visitor, the vampire. The solemn tones of an old cathedral clock have announced midnight. The air is thick and heavy. A strange, death-like stillness pervades all nature. Like the ominous calm which precedes some more than usually terrific outbreak of the elements, they seem to have paused even in their ordinary fluctuations to gather a terrific strength for the great effort. A faint peal of thunder now comes from far off, like the signal gun for the battle of the winds to begin. It appeared to awaken them from their lethargy, and one more awful, warring hurricane swept over a whole city, producing more devastation in the 4 or 5 minutes it lasted than would a half century of ordinary phenomenon. It was as if some giant had blown upon some toy town and scattered many buildings before the hot blast of his terrific breath. For as suddenly as the blast of wind had come did it cease, and all was as still and calm as before. Sleepers awakened. The thought that they had heard the thought excuse me. Sleepers awakened and thought that what they had heard must be the confused chimera of a dream. They trembled and turned to sleep again. All is still as a very grave. Not a sound breaks the magic of repose. What is that? A strange pattering noise, as of a million fairy feet. It is hail. Yes, a hailstorm has burst over the city. Leaves are dashed from the trees, mingled with the small boughs. Windows that lie most open, opposed to the direct fury of the pelting particles of ice, are broken, and the rapt repose that before was so remarkable in its intensity is exchanged for noise which, in its accumulation, drowns every cry of surprise or consternation which here and there arose from persons who found their houses invaded by the storm. Now and then, too, there would come a sudden gust of wind that, in its strength, as it blew laterally, would, for a moment, hold millions of hailstones suspended in midair. But it was only to dash them with redoubled force in some new direction, where where more mischief was to be done. Oh, how the storm raged! Hell, rain! It was, in very truth, an awful night. There was an antique chamber in an ancient house. Curious and quaint carvings adorn the walls, and a very large chimney piece is a curiosity of itself. The ceiling is low, and a large bay window from its roof to floor looks to the west. Windows are latticed and filled with a curiously painted glass, and rich stained pieces, which send in a strange yet beautiful light when the sun or moon shines into the apartment. There is but one portrait in that room, although the walls seem paneled for the express purpose of containing a series of pictures. That portrait is a young man with a pale face, a stately brow, and a strange expression about the eyes, which no one cared to look on twice. There is a stately bed in that chamber, of carved walnut wood. It is made, rich in design and elaborate in execution. One of those works which owe their existence to the Elizabethan era. It is hung with heavy silken and damask furnishing. Nodding feathers at its corners, covered with dust are they, and they lend a funerary aspect to the room. The floor is of polished oak. God, how the hail dashes on the old bay window, like an occasional discharge of mimic musketry. It comes clashing, beating, and cracking upon the small panes. But they resist it. Their small size saves them. The wind, the hail, the rain expend their fury in vain. The bed in that room chamber is occupied. A creature formed in all fashions of loveliness lies in a half sleep upon the ancient couch. A girl, young and beautiful as a very spring morning. Her long hair has escaped from its confinement and streams over the blackened coverings of the bedstead. She has been restless in her sleep, for the clothing of the bed is in much confusion. One arm is over her head, the other hangs nearly off the side of the bed near to which she lies. A neck and bosom that would have formed a study for the rarest sculptor that ever Providence gave genius to, were half disclosed. She moaned slightly in her sleep, and once or twice her lips moved as if in prayer. At least one might judge so, for the name of him who suffered for all came once faintly from them. She had endured much fatigue, and the storm doth not awaken her. But it can disturb the slumbers it does not possess the power to destroy entirely. The turmoil of the elements wakes the senses, though it cannot entirely break the repose they have lapsed into. Oh, what a world of witchery was in that mouth, slightly parted and exhibiting within the pearly teeth that glistened. She moved, and one shoulder is entirely visible, whiter, fairer than the spotless clothing of the bed on which she lies, is the smooth skin of that fair creature, just budding into womanhood. And in that transition state, which presents to us all of the charms of the girl, almost of the child, with the more matured beauty and gentleness of advancing years. The hail continues, the wind continues, the uproar of the elements seems at its height. Now she awakens, that beautiful girl on the antique bed. She opens her eyes of celestial blue, and a faint cry of alarm bursts from the lips. At least it is a cry which, amid the noise and turmoil without, sounds but faint and weak. She sits upon the bed and presses her hands upon her eyes. Heavens! What a wild torrent of wind and rain and hail! The thunder likewise seems intent upon awakening sufficient echoes to last until the next flash of fork lightning should again produce the wild concussion of the air. She murmurs a prayer for those she loves best. The names of those dear to her gentle heart come from her lips. She weeps and prays. She thinks then of the devastation the storm must surely produce. And to the great God of heaven, she prays for all living things. Another flash, a wild, blue, bewildering flash of lightning, streams across the bay window, for an instant bringing out every color in it with terrible distinction. A shriek burst from the lips of the young girl. And then, with eyes fixed upon that window, which in another moment is all darkness, dang, I lost my place. And which such as an expression of terror upon her face as had never before known. She trembled, and perspiration of intense fear stood upon her brow. What what is it? She gasped. Real or delusion? Oh God, what is it? A figure tall and gaunt, endeavoring from the outside to unclasp the window. I saw it. The flash of lightning revealed it to me. It stood the whole length of the window. There was a lull in the wind. The hail was not falling so thickly. Moreover, it now fell, or there was of it, straight, and yet a strange clattering sound came upon the glass of that long window. It could not be a delusion. She is awake, and she hears it. What can produce it? Another flash of lightning, another shriek. There could be now no delusion. A tall figure is standing at the ledge immediately outside the long window. It is its fingernails upon the glass that produces the sound like the hail. Now that the hail has ceased, intense fear paralyzes the limbs of the beautiful girl. That one shriek is all she can utter. With hand clasped, a face of marble, a heart beating so wildly in her bosom that each moment it seems as if it would break its confines, eyes distended and fixed upon the window, she waits, froze with horror. The pattering and clattering of the nails continues. No word is spoken, and now she fancies she can trace the darker form of that figure against the window, and she can see the long arms moving to and fro, feeling for some mode of entrance. What strange light is that now gradually creeps up into the air, and the terrible, brighter and brighter it grows. The lightning has set fire to a mill, and the reflect of the rapidly consuming building falls upon the long window. There can be no mistake. The figure is there, still feeling for an entrance, and clattering against the glass with long nails that appear as if the growth of many years had been untouched. She tries to scream again, but a choking sensation comes over, and she cannot. It is too dreadful. She tries to move, each limb weighted down by tons of lead. She can but in a hoarse whisper cry, "Help! Help! Help!" Excuse me. And that one word she repeats, like a person in a dream. The red glare of the fire continues. It throws up the tall, gaunt figure in hideous relief against the long window. It shows, too, upon the one portrait that is in the chamber, and the portrait appears to fix its eyes upon the attempted intruder, while the flickering light from the fire makes it look fearfully lifelike. A small pane of glass is broken, and the form without introduces a long, gaunt hand, which seems utterly destitute of flesh. The fastening is removed, and one half of the window, which opens like folding doors, is swung wide, open upon its hinges. And yet now she could not scream. She could not move. "Help, help, help," was all that she could say. But oh, that look of terror that she set upon her face. It was dreadful. A look to haunt the memory of a lifetime. A look to obtrude herself upon the happiest moments and turn them to bitterness. The figure turns half round, and the light upon its face, perfectly white, perfectly bloodless. The eyes look like polished tin. Lips are drawn back. And the principal features next to those dreadful eyes is the teeth, the fearful looking teeth, projecting like those of some wild animal, hideously, glaringly white and fang-like. It approaches the bed with a strange gliding movement. It clasps together the long nails that literally appear to hang from the finger ends. No sound comes from its lips. Is she going mad? The young, beautiful girl exposed to so much terror? She has drawn up all her limbs. Cannot even now say help. The power of articulation is gone, but the power of movement has returned to her. She can draw herself slowly along the other side of the bed, from that towards which the hideous appearance is coming. But her eyes are fascinated. The glance of a serpent could not have produced a greater effect upon her than did the fixed gaze of those awful metallic looking eyes that were bent down on her face, crouching down so that the gigantic height was lost, and the horrible protruding white face was the most prominent object came on the figure. What is it? What did it want? What made it look so hideous, so unlike an inhabitant of the earth, and yet beyond it? Now has got to get to the verge of the bed, and the figure pauses. It seemed as if it paused. She lost her power to proceed. The clothing of the bed was now clutched in her hands with unconscious power. She drew her breath short and thick. Her bosom heaves, and her limbs tremble. Yet she cannot withdraw her eyes from the marble-looking face. She holds her. He holds her with his glittering eye. The storm has ceased. All is still. The winds are pushed, and the church clock proclaims the hour of 1. A hissing sound comes from the throat of the hideous being as he raises his long, gaunt arms. The lips move. He advances. The girl places one small foot on the floor. She is unconsciously dragging her clothing with her. The door of the room is in that direction. Can she reach it? Has she has she power to walk? Can she withdraw her eyes from the face of the intruder and so break the hideous charm? God of heaven, is it real? Some dream so like reality as to nearly overturn judgment forever? The figure has paused again, and half on the bed and half on of it that young girl half on the bed and half out of it that girl lies trembling. Her long hair streams across the entire width of the bed. As she is slowly moved along, has left it streaming across the pillows. The pause lasted about a minute. Oh, what an age of agony! The minute was indeed enough for madness to do its full working. With sudden rush that could not be foreseen, with a strange howling cry that was enough to awaken terror in every breast, the figure seized the long tresses of her hair, and twinning them around his bony hands, he held her to the bed. Then she screamed! Heaven granted her the power to scream. Shriek followed shriek in rapid succession. The blood clothes fell in a heap upon the side of the bed. She was dragged, her long silken hair completely onto it again. Her beautifully rounded limbs quivered with the agony of her soul. The glassy, horrible eyes of the figure ran over the angelic form with a hideous satisfaction. Horrible profanation. He drags her to the bed's edge. He forces her back by her long hair, still entwined in his grip. With a plunge, he seizes her neck in his fang-like teeth. A gush of blood and a hideous sucking noise follows. The girl has swooned, and the vampire is at his hideous repast. That is the end of the first chapter of Varney the Vampire. We will pick up next week with chapter 2, The Alarm, the Pistol Shot, the Pursuit and its Consequences. So, I'm hoping you guys enjoyed this reading of a little bit of Victorian horror. I had fun doing it, although my throat definitely needs a rest. Yes, and we will be starting again at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Thursday of next week. We'll do a regular show, and then I'll be doing this afterwards. Brian will probably be joining me for it. I was going to make a little bit of a comment on what I read so far. Um, Good Lord, does this writer, whoever he is, love his purple prose? I mean, I'm all for description, but the amount of time that was spent on that storm seemed a little excessive to me. But it certainly sets a mood. I'm enjoying it. I'm looking forward to going further. I like that it starts right. It's like right in the thick of things. We don't start with Jonathan Harker traveling to Castle Dracula. We don't start with a reporter interviewing a vampire. It's right with the first attack. So I'm looking forward to seeing where we go from here. Remember, that's one chapter down, 231 chapters to go. 231 chapters to go. If you liked this episode and if you liked the one before it, please give me a like, leave me a comment. Particularly, let me know if you enjoyed this story time. Um, this is kind of new for me and new for the channel, so I'm not so sure about doing it. If people enjoyed it, please tell me. Um, and thank you, Teresa. Teresa Hall saying that it definitely sets the mood, pulled her in, and she's glad I'm reading it. I'm glad I'm reading it too. I'm enjoying it. If this goes well, if people enjoy it, when we get through Varney, which is going to be some time, though I'll probably read more than one chapter in the future, or maybe sucker Brian into reading. I'll read a chapter, have him read a chapter. Um, but it's going to take a while. Remember, this got released once a week from 1845 to 1847, so there's a lot to cover, even chapter by chapter. Thank you all for joining me so much tonight. If you liked this episode and the one before, if you like what I'm doing, please like, comment, subscribe, share it with your friends. If you have a little bit of money you can spare, consider going to our Patreon, patreon.com/demonology. That's patreon.com/demonology. Feel free to donate. If you can't afford to, I totally understand. Times are tight. Tape for me, I know the tape for other people. There's no shame for that. This is always going to be a free show. I don't intend to ever charge to watch. That's not what I'm about. Um, there are other perks I could certainly offer, and please feel free to suggest them. If you have anything in mind you'd be interested in, but episodes will always be free. That's going to do it for tonight, though. Remember, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thursdays is the new time for the show. Until then, this is Kevin Mears, demonologist and paranormal encyclopedia, saying good night and God bless. Good night, everybody.